Well, as you can see behind me, the body is off the frame again. And, I'd love to be able to say that, I'm working on this in the most linear fashion. And maybe, I don't know if linear means following the build manual or what, but the reality is sometimes parts aren't here. I know I've mentioned this before, but it's actually not that big a deal, and it really hasn't slowed things down a little bit. I'm lucky in the sense that I can raise and lower this body by myself. It only takes about 5 minutes. It's really easy. I guess I'm lucky in that sense to have 14-foot ceilings. But so now that I've got all my parts, all the parts showed up, all the parts for the IRS and rear braking, they're all here. So body's off. I've put aside some of that custom fabrication I was doing. You saw the roll bar. I also did some work on my dash, which is a custom dash. I'm kind of circle back around to that, and we'll get a little bit more into that part of the build in a little bit. But for today, it's IRS, brakes, possibly some emergency brake stuff. I don't know if I'll get to that. And really anything else that I need to do with the body off. And then we'll go from there. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching. I've spoken about raising and lowering the body enough. I probably should show a quick clip on how that looks. Yeah, and yes, I realize in this case I'm putting the body back on the chassis, and most of video number 7 here is with the body off. But as you'll notice in this particular video, I'm bouncing around quite a bit in the project, and that's in part just kind of filling in some gaps while I'm waiting on parts, waiting on some things on my back order list. They are showing up kind of randomly. Every week or so I get a box or two from Factory 5. It's kind of like Christmas. But so yeah, here the body's in place, or almost in place, and now we're going to move on to doing a little bit of sheet metal, a little bit of aluminum work, and then moving on to finishing up the rear suspension. I don't have a glove box in this build. I decided to go ahead and put in a rear cubby spot. So here I'm cutting those holes, cutting the access hole. I decided to use a router and a circle, little homemade circle guide there to make sure the radius is nice and clean. And when the time comes, I'll put in some edge guard that will encapsulate both the raw edge of the aluminum as well as the carpet. So I'm trying to draw these studs into the hub, and I could not get them in, even with a lot of torque. You're supposed to be able to put a bolt on and kind of pull them in, and these ridges kind of seat and they permanently press it into place, but there was nothing pulling these in, so I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing this or not. Probably not, but I'm going to chuck this in my lathe here, and I'm going to file just a little of this knurl off, just to allow these to go in. I'll kind of sneak up on it, we'll see, but hopefully I can get these things in. Hopefully that knocked off enough to draw these in. FYI, this lathe was built in 1878. That's the date stamped on it. And I brought it back to life last year. It was in little pieces in a barn. And it was actually being used to hold open a barn door, half buried in the dirt. And some guy gave it to me. And I use it all the time. Now let's see if looks like this first one went in pretty nicely. That was my test fit. You saw me just grind just the very top of these knurls off. I don't know, a knurl, is that what you call it? Those things. This first one went in pretty nicely, not easy. I didn't show you before I was doing this, but before I took a little off in the lathe, I was putting everything I had into pulling these into place, and they were not budging. I used an impact wrench. I put a cheater bar on my socket set. Nothing, and I was starting to fear snapping something, so I did this. And that first one went in, took some work, but it goes in. So I know, again, there's probably those out there that are watching me do this thinking, oh God, I can't believe he's doing it that way. But it worked. Well, these are definitely not coming out.
ready to put this spindle in place. This is the passenger side spindle for the IRS. I noticed that this is a bit narrow. The same thing happened on the other side, so I'm going to do a little bit of a preemptive strike and splay these a bit, which is easier said than done. Primarily, well, they don't need much, about 1/16 of an inch it seems. And then when you draw the bolts in, it draws them tight again. But this is just to get them in place. Otherwise, something's gonna have to be hammered, and I really would rather not hammer on stuff like that. But this seems to work pretty well.
Well, I got the rear end components in place. I'm going to now torque them all to spec. All the torque numbers are listed in the back of the book, so you just have to reference that part. But the second side, the passenger side, went a lot faster than the driver's side once I realized that you really have to splay out those various points on the upper and lower control arm. Not upper arm, sorry. Lower control arm and, well, that doodad. I'm losing my term right now. But I splayed those out about 1/8 of an inch in every case, and that allowed things to kind of push into place. Then when you torque it down, things come back to their correct position. But there's no way of getting them in unless you're spreading them a little bit. So I'm gonna get these torqued to spec, and then we're gonna move on to the brakes, rear brakes, and probably on to the, I'm guessing the next step would be the emergency brake run. So here we go. Well, I'm in the middle of installing the brakes for the rear IRS. They're a specific brake package, and it's more than an adventure. I've been struggling with this for a little while. Finally had to reach out to the group on the forum, and they steered me straight. There are no instructions in the build manual for the brakes. You have to go online. And unfortunately, when you go online and download it from Factory 5, there actually seem to be a couple versions of it. Not all that, I think, well put together, but got them together and nothing lined up. Everything was off by inches. That's when I reached out to the forum. And so I'm going to show you, I'm hoping what I'm showing you right now is going to save somebody out there some work. The manual doesn't mention anything about additional modification to the spindle beyond cutting that one ear off. So if you follow the manual, you get the spindle installed, you get all the parts installed, connected to the car, hub in place, and then it says refer to the online manual for installing the rear brakes at the end of this kind of section. You get there and you find out you actually have to trim an additional tab off the spindle. You can do it on the car, it's just messy. I am gonna do it on the car because I do not want to take all these parts off. But an asterisk or something would have been nice in the owner's manual saying, hey, this won't work until you cut this off. So I'm gonna show you what it is you need to do. Once you do that, everything kind of goes together as it should. I wish I would have known this last night at midnight. I would have slept better last night. This is the offending tab right here. This is what needs to come off. The difficult part is here's the adapter you receive, and it actually does work with this tab in place. In fact, things kind of line up, and this is unfortunately what I did because it makes sense, right? It looks like they all line up. Bolted everything together, and obviously the caliper no longer sits on the rotor correctly in that place. So I'm going to cut this off. You then replace this bolt here, and it bolts in like that. So this is going to come off right now. It says to use a Sawzall or something like that. I found actually a die grinder is a lot easier to use. Seems to cut through it cleaner. Less chance for problems, so here we go. First step is to remove this bolt. One of the bolts that secures the hub assembly here. Of course, I just put this in yesterday. Would have been nice to know, but here we go. And it's really in there, and there's really no way to get at it with a ratchet or anything longer than this wrench. So I do have to persuade it a little bit. So I figured I'd do a quick walk around, maybe to wrap up this this video. Still waiting on steering stuff. Kind of looking forward to getting those parts in, but like I said, it hasn't held me up really. Got the foot pedals in, most of that stuff done, brake lines run, quick shot at the brake lines. That was done a couple builds ago, I guess. A couple episodes ago, I should say. And my recent accomplishment was the finishing up the rear suspension and brakes. Brakes are a challenge. I'm sure you've seen that to this point. Quick wrap around the back here. Fiberglass drop trunk. It's not secured in yet. When it does, it'll fit nice and tight, but it still pops right out, which is gonna make life pretty easy in the future for service. Yeah, brakes. A lot of stuff on these I would have liked to have known going into this. The owner's manual's, I think, beyond vague. And this part, at least from my perspective, I'm sure those out there had a much easier go of it. But could have been one of those self-fulfilling prophecies too. For some reason I was nervous about brakes, so maybe I willed it upon myself. Who knows? Got most of the wiring run, the main parts run. Kind of debating on whether I should go ahead and just buy my own battery cable. It's still on back order. I would like to get that kind of done. And yeah, I think that's about where we are. I know I've had to bounce around a little bit. Had the body on for a while. Now I have to back off. And I think I'm going to start to actually think about what it's going to take to put the motor in. I've still got some custom work to do on the dash, but I think we're going to leave that. I think we're going to end this video here. Thanks for watching and have a great one.